VShojo was once considered one of the crown jewels of the VTuber world. A VTuber Corpo, short for VTuber Corporation, is essentially a talent agency that represents anime avatar performers, real people behind digital personas. In a space dominated by only a handful of large agencies worldwide, VShojo stood out as one of the most influential. Founded in 2020, just as Hololive was making its big push into the West, VShojo rode the crest of the VTuber boom. Their concept was simple yet appealing: talent freedom. Unlike the tightly controlled idol-style agencies of Japan, where every tweet, stream, and creative decision needed corporate approval, VShojo promised its talent the ability to do what they wanted, how they wanted. They weren't just ambitious, they were backed by big money. In 2021, VShojo secured $11 million in venture capital, signaling they were aiming for the top. They assembled a roster filled with fan favorites, from their co-founder Project Melody to breakout stars like Ironmouse, and later high-profile recruits such as Henya, Kuro, Matara, and even Michi Mochivi. Even after controversies like the Nuxtaku fallout, Project Melody's model copyright dispute, the Hogwarts Legacy harassment debacle, and the departures of Nanners, and Silvervale, VShojo always seemed to come out stronger. For years, they maintained an image as the anti-corporate VTuber agency, a haven for creative freedom where big-name talents thrived without the suffocating restrictions of traditional management. They had influence, money, and goodwill, and then they lost it all in less than 3 days. But the thing about reputation is they're fragile. It doesn't matter how many years you've spent building trust, one ugly truth can bring it all crashing down. For VShojo, that moment came when their biggest star, Ironmouse, went live and dropped a bombshell. She revealed that VShojo had failed to deliver one of the most important promises that ever made to her. $500,000 meant for her immune deficiency charity foundation never made it to where it was supposed to go. And that wasn't all. According to Ironmouse, the company also owed her a massive amount of unpaid income from her work. This wasn't a small slip-up. It was a revelation that turned a beloved agency's talent freedom brand into something much darker. In the span of a single stream, VShojo's carefully crafted image wasn't just dented, it was obliterated. At this point, everyone stopped and asked the same question. Were they warning signs all along? Were we just too blinded by the talent freedom dream to see them? Looking back, the months leading up to Ironmouse revelation do paint a troubling picture. The air inside VShojo felt unsettled. Staff changes and internal shuffles were happening just enough to spark suspicion, yet never with any real explanations. What we got were vague tweets, quiet terminations, and abrupt departures, breadcrumbs that didn't lead anywhere. And then came the Matara graduation. On April 28, 2025, Matara announces she was terminating her contract with VShojo. But the language she used, VShojo made the decision to part ways with me, made it clear this wasn't her choice. It felt like a corporate decision dropped on her, not a voluntary goodbye. So the community was stunned, left with more questions than answers, but as much as we speculated, no one was getting closer to the truth. Matara summed it up best. VShojo would promise you the world, granting a sense of creative liberty and opportunity, always followed by vague assurances that we'll put it all in the contract. But what did that actually mean if it was never formally defined or delivered? Even talented creators were uncertain if any of those promises had legal weight or were just alluring illusions. And just when it seemed like things might stabilize, more cracks began to appear. On May 14, 2025, VShojo's chief marketing officer, known as Mo Tendu, announced he was departing to explore new creative endeavors. On the surface, it sounded like a graceful exit, but to anyone watching closely, it felt like another glaring sign, a vital part of the agency's machinery quietly walking away from the cockpit of a ship veering off course. And then, just 5 days later, May 19, 2025, Turbo Dog, one of the VShojo's key artists, announced his departure as well. And by May 21st, Pochi, who had been in charge of merchandise, also left. 3 employees employees stepping away from the company in such close succession didn't feel like a coincidence. Rumors began swirling in the community, but nothing concrete could be nailed down by netizens. The next major blow came on June 25, 2025, with the sudden announcement that Giga was leaving. It was surprising. Not only had she joined less than 2 years earlier, but she had always seemed to be thriving in VShojo. That same day, Ironmouse tweeted, "I stood up for myself recently, and it was really scary, but I'm glad I did it in the end." Maybe it was related, maybe it wasn't, but for VShojo fans, it was impossible to shake the feeling that something was happening behind the scenes. Whispers started spreading, and worry settled in. And on July 10, 2025, another high-profile staff exit shook the agency. Panini, the highly regarded director of talent and trusted talent manager, left after 3 years with the company. For many, this was starting to feel less like coincidence and more like the visible unraveling of VShojo from within. On June 27, 2025, Zen's departure was then announced, and it was arguably the most shocking of them all. Zentraya was one of VShojo's original members, a staunch defender of the company who often took the blame and bore the brunt of backlash on their behalf. One of the biggest controversies surrounding VShojo had been its nepotism style hiring. Well, that and the Nux VShojo controversy, but I covered that in another video. After multiple open audition rounds that thousands of aspiring VTubers applied to, fans started to notice a pattern. VShojo seemed to consistently choose already large and established creators. So for smaller talents, it started to feel like the auditions were just for show. They stood no real chances. Zentraya was one of the few who defended the company publicly, pushing for them to scout and debut smaller VTubers. She even tweeted that this was the plan moving forward. But the very next talent announced wasn't a hidden gem. It was indie VTuber Amalie. This drew immediate criticism, prompting both Amalie and Zentraya to issue clarifications on their own Twitter accounts, explaining that the recruitment had been in the works for over a year and that VShojo still intended to debut smaller creators. The mixed reception left lingering doubts about the company's transparency, and many wondered why these clarifications were coming from the talents themselves rather than VShojo. Regardless, her exit sent a clear message. Something was wrong. After leaving, Zen began posting vague and ominous tweets hinting that there was far more happening behind the scenes than anyone realized. But then, everything changed when this happened.
I am leaving VShojo. Unfortunately, I recently found out that for the past couple of months, I have been misled by VShojo. With the information that I currently have, I believe that I am owed a significant amount of funds, which I have not been paid. And most importantly, the thing that hurts me the most is that the Immune Deficiency Foundation, which is the most important charity to me, and also the reason why I'm here today, is owed over $500,000 from VShojo.
In her announcement, Ironmouse opens up by saying she can't say much due to her attorneys and ongoing legal proceedings, but she still wants to share part of her story. She explains her condition, CVID, a rare immune deficiency that leaves her with a near non-functioning immune system, forcing her into long periods of isolation. Streaming became her lifeline, a way to connect with others when she couldn't physically leave her room. Ironmouse indeed had humble beginnings. Before becoming one of Twitch's most beloved VTubers, Ironmouse started with nothing more than a $5.99 face rig program, a free Steam avatar, and an iPhone headphones, streaming not for fame but as an escape from the crushing isolation of her illness. Her dreams of being an opera singer were derailed, but her voice still found an audience. As the pandemic hit, clips of her singing began to go viral, her operating range captivating viewers. If you've ever tuned in, you know she's a burst of energy in every stream. Ironmouse then recounts how she was approached in 2020 to join VShojo. At first, she hesitated, fearing for her anonymity and wary of trusting people after past betrayals. Ultimately, she agreed, but quickly found herself under immense pressure. She was often told she was essential to VShojo's success, a compliment that became a burden. She felt responsible for staff and other talents, making it hard to walk away even when when she was uncomfortable. After all, she was their biggest talent. Privacy was always a top priority for her, so VShojo's ability to pay her without needing personal information was a relief, until she began seeking more financial independence and withdrawing funds. That's when the real problems begun. Over the years, she and Connor had raised about $4 million for the Immune Deficiency Foundation, including pledging half the revenue from her last two subathons. But because this most recent $515,000 donation came directly from her Twitch revenue, VShojo was supposed to pay it on her behalf. A year later, she discovered they still hadn't.
So, to recap, I believe that I am owed a significant amount of funds, which I have not been paid. And most importantly, the Immune Deficiency Foundation is owed over $500,000 from VShojo.
On top of that, she says VShojo still owes her a significant sum in wages. This was staggering. For Ironmouse, VShojo's biggest talent, one of their most loyal defenders, and someone who avoided controversy at all costs. To speak out like this meant things had to be dire. For her to feel so cornered that this was her only option was shocking. And it wasn't just about money, it was about betrayal. Here was someone with a life-threatening illness, relying on her agency for support, and they had taken advantage of that trust. Scummy doesn't even begin to cover it. At the time of her video, the Immune Deficiency Foundation had a goal of $10,000 to help cover the unpaid donation. After she shared the link, fans quickly shattered that target, and donations started pouring in within hours. The community was blindsided by the video. The moment Ironmouse's words left her mouth, shockwaves ripped through the VTuber world. At first, it was just the dedicated VShojo watchers reeling from the news, stunned that their most loyal and iconic talent was calling out her own company. But the story didn't stay contained for long. Within hours, the ripples turned into waves. Large creators like Asmongold and Moist Critical jumped on the story, dissecting it for their millions of viewers. And then it broke containment entirely. Mainstream news outlets started running headlines. What began as a VTuber community scandal had exploded into a full-on internet-wide firestorm, with each new retelling pulling in an even bigger audience. As speculation snowballed and information spread, the usual internet pattern emerged. More stories and more accusations began to surface. It was as if a Pandora's box had been opened. One of the most notable accusations came from a Japanese media personality, Shibuya Kaho, who shared her own troubling encounter with a VShojo staff member. This person moved from a noted VTuber company to another as a staff last year, bragging about his new income. He trusted me a few of his business cards to give to my good contacts. I found the action obnoxiously rude, but maybe he was too young and friendly to know better. Then, DMF wanted to meet up for tax advice, because I'm a native in Japan and I hire an accountant. I was asked to have dinner in his area, which was quite far from me, splitting the bill. That day, I got convinced I didn't like the guy. Yet, because I love the talents he worked with, I was only secretly hoping he would lose his job one day. Recently, I heard from another creator that he was showing photos of VTubers' real selves while revealing their personal info like marital status. I now wanted to find a way to warn other employees. Today, I've learned the most despicable shit the company has done to their talents. Don't know if he's involved with it, yet all my personal grudges is nothing compared to such betrayal. Sometimes, unfortunately, managers or agencies can be talent's worst enemy. Please always support the talent. Talent first. This really painted a disturbing picture of unprofessionalism and boundary violations, and a corporate culture that allegedly allowed this kind of behavior to happen. And with each new testimony, the trust VShojo had built over years eroded faster. But the floodgates didn't stop with Shibuya Keiho's account. Soon more artists and collaborators began coming forward with their own stories. Claims of unpaid work, month-long delays, and questionable business practices that painted a very different picture of the Pink Company. Vertoxi, for example, said it took VShojo 2 months just to pay him $500. Starlight Daryl shared that the company had a habit of dragging its feet on commission payments, sometimes leaving thousands of dollars in invoices untouched for months. And music producer Shiro Beat revealed he was also owed thousands and even had to chase people down just to make sure his friends got paid. And then there was M-Rage Astral Systems, an apparel company who claimed that after a successful collaboration, VShojo had copied and even traced their work without permission. A few days later, but worth mentioning here for the sake of clarity, another voice joined the growing chorus of frustration. Araculture, a creative brand, shared their personal experience working with VShojo. They had invested months of efforts and thousands of dollars into pitching collaboration ideas, starting with a canine Kuro jacket design, which was met with initial enthusiasm. But instead of forming a real partnership, VShojo offered a simple buyout for the design and supplier information. It felt transactional and like a stab in the back, a far cry from the collaborative spirit they had hoped for. Araculture didn't give up and continued to pitch multiple projects for other talents, but nothing ever moved forward. While they made clear they held no resentment towards individual staff, they pointed to a deeper problem, a flawed structure that failed to support meaningful creator collaborations. And then came the most surprising part. Kuro himself replied to the post. He said he had never been shown the design by anyone ever, despite asking multiple times if a jacket could be made. That revelation made fans question whether the problem was just poor management or something even more broken in the company's internal communication. It was becoming clear that these weren't just isolated cases. They were symptoms of something bigger. One story after another painted a picture of a company stretched thin, mismanaged, and unable to follow through on even its most basic commitments. And then the cracks in the foundation split wide open. The content creator Ilara then received an anonymous tip from VShojo employee. According to this source, months earlier, the company had gone through mass layoffs caused by mismanagement and poor financial decisions. We had noticed the most high-profile departures when they were announced on Twitter, but little did we know back then that many more were laid off as well. These layoffs weren't just background noises, they were directly tied to the growing dissatisfaction among talents, and in some cases, the reason they left altogether. Some talents had even fought to keep specific staff members since they needed them, but when those pleas were ignored, they walked away. Worse still, many of these layoffs happened with less than 2 weeks' notice, sometimes just a few days. The source claimed that some of those let go might now be preparing to take legal action against VShojo as well. And then Shy Lily goes live, and she has a lot to say on the matter as well. She reveals during her stream that VShojo approached her in the second half of 2023 with an offer to join the company, and she had a few things to say about their contracts, describing them as good for VTubers starting off, but daylight robbery for established independents. She begins by explaining how they first reached out.
And when they reached out, the person who reached out, they promised the fucking world. They had this big-ass, long-ass meeting and promised the world.
Shy Lily recalls how she had applied once before, prior to her debut, and even made it past the first round, only to never hear back. Yet suddenly, at the peak of her career, they came knocking again. Given VShojo's reputation for poaching large talents, this wasn't exactly surprising. At first, she was curious, but once contract negotiations started, she quickly spotted some glaring red flags. First red flag, the revenue share model.
Red flags that I noticed right away. My biggest contract was the revenue share. I did not like how their revenue splits with merchandise and similar things. They wanted too much revenue share, way too much. And the money they offered me in exchange for taking this much of my revenue was just not even that was an insult. That was a genuine red flag because they kept calling 50-50 splits what was that word? Industry standard.
The second, they wanted a 5% cut of third-party deals, like her Gamer Subs partnership or sponsors that Mythic brought in. Deals VShojo had no hand in whatsoever. And their justification, that her income would only be that high because of VShojo's amazing reputation. But Shy Lily was already an established name. It made no sense. And then came the biggest red flag of all.
The by far biggest red flag was I asked them to sign a non-compete between them and Mythic. They didn't want to sign that. I have proof of everything, by the way, and before anyone tries to pull some weird sneaky shit or VShojo try some weird sneaky shit, I have proof of everything. They then tried to argue when I asked about the non-compete. They were like, hey, we operate on a trust basis, and I was like, don't give a shit. Don't care. It's a contract. Trust basis.
And honestly, she's right. Trust means nothing if it's not on paper. If they want to operate on trust, then sign the damn contract.
The second red flag was in this beautiful first interview where they presented everything of what VShojo can and will do for me. I asked straight up, put them in a contract. Everything you offer, put it in a contract. Needlessly to say, that part never happened. There is absolutely no reason to not have them in a contract. But when I ask you to put it on paper in the contract that you want me to sign, you refuse.
She also wanted to negotiate a safeguard that VShojo couldn't simply take down her content or control what she says. She proposed a clause where they could ask her to remove something, but the final decision would rest with her. VShojo flat out refused. So much for talent freedom. Instead, it felt like they were playing heavily on emotions. And then she highlighted something called quarterly payouts, meaning talents would wait 4 months before getting paid.
Also, they wanted me to have quarterly payouts. I suggested that's bad. I don't want that. It makes it difficult to track stuff, and human error can persist during these. I don't want that. Which, you know, that isn't necessarily the biggest red flag. It's just like it leaves room for error that can be left unaccounted because it's difficult to keep track of these things.
And really, why wait 4 months for payments to even show up in the books? Worse, she said, VShojo's lawyer came across as lost, unprofessional, and condescending whenever she would mention industry standards. Yikes. In the end, Shy Lily said she even tried warning friends about the contract, but some signed anyway, and she acknowledged you can't make business choices for others, you just hope they know what they're getting into. But her breakdown gave us one of the clearest insights yet onto how VShojo's contracts worked. We already knew, for instance, that management could delete talent's tweets, like when they took down Queson's post during the fruit situation. But now Shy Lily's story confirmed it all. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice that many of the talents who spoke up later corroborated everything she revealed here. But the most damning accusations would come directly from the talents and ex-talents of the company. Queson, a VTuber known for her boldness, was the most outspoken of the bunch. She immediately put up a livestream waiting room with the thumbnail, "We need an explanation, please answer VShojo," demanding answers from the company, and a few hours later, she went live. Queson revealed she had already been planning on leaving VShojo this month, and that the company owed her a significant amount of money since September 2024.
What I wanted to tell you guys is that first of all, I was already planning to leave VShojo this month, specifically on the 31st. And the reason why, because VShojo hasn't paid a significant amount of money. What should I say? They haven't paid me since last year. I guess it was September.
But the wildest part of the stream came when she got into a call with the CEO of VShojo's Japanese branch. The conversation between Queson and the VShojo Japan CEO took place in Japanese, of course, so we'll read through the translation here. What was revealed was quite unsettling. Queson began by explaining why she entrusted VShojo with her business dealings. Like Masse said, to prevent leaking my personal information, I had VShojo handle deals and stuff on my behalf. They weren't supposed to take my money and would only handle the communication for me, but I guess they took them anyways. And then the topic of Ironmouse unpaid $500,000 charity donation came up. But simply, that's embezzlement, right? The VShojo CEO said, embezzlement? And Queson responds, well, the question becomes, where did the money go, right? He says, that's true. I believe that it may have been used for operational costs. I haven't received any money from VShojo starting September last year, though. Does operational costs refer to the staff salaries then? The CEO admitted money flow wasn't good, and many questions were simply left unanswered. He revealed he only learned about Ironmouse's missing charity donation a few weeks earlier. That money was held by the main company, he says. There wasn't much I myself could do, and I couldn't look into the finances personally. carefully. The CEO explained the structure of VShojo's branches. There is GP and EN, and JP is entirely under EN. The finances of JP are pretty much all held by EN too, and VShojo JP's wallet is the same as EN, so if EN's wallet is empty, JP's is empty too. And even though the Japanese side was doing good operationally, Queson called out the contradiction. Wait, so you know the Japanese talents were not being paid yet? And the CEO responds, yes, that's not doing good then. And right in the middle of this stance back and forth, Queson straight up told the Japanese CEO to his face, I quit VShojo today. I was planning on doing it on the 31st, but I'm doing it today. I quit. This is very wrong, and she is such a legend for it. Queson's anger was clear as she described how the company handled the money meant for her and the fans. I feel like I got scammed. I kept getting, wait, we'll pay you. And the fans paid using the money they worked hard to earn to buy our merch and support us through our deals. And all that money that got paid to VShojo is now gone? That feels much like a scam. I was planning on using the money I would get from the fans to do bigger and better things for them, and it was a quite large amount. Before ending the stream, Queson reassured fans about a few important points. She clarified that VShojo never touched the revenue earned directly through Twitch, so talents, including herself, weren't completely without income. But that wasn't the core issue. What truly mattered was the breach of trust with the fans. She emphasized that all VShojo talents still retain full ownership of their IPs and can continue streaming independently. What they lost wasn't their careers, it was faith in the company and a significant amount of money. And then she took to Twitter to tweet, feeling ashamed for all the positive stuff I've said about the company turned out to be a fucking lies. Yes, go ahead and laugh at me. Why am I so stupid? Why do I not learn? Why do I always try to see the good side of people just to learn they don't fucking care? Of course, it's all about the money. I'm nothing for the corpos without the money. But you know what? I'm still lucky because I got you. My Sheena ties, as long as I'm living, I'm thriving. Then Michi Mochibi went live with her own announcement. And it was an emotional stream where she officially revealed she was leaving VShojo as well. But it wasn't just farewell. Michi also disclosed that VShojo owes her a significant amount of unpaid money.
But basically, I recently found out that VShojo owes me a good amount of unpaid debt.
She recounted her beginnings as a socially anxious anime and 3D concert fan who first started streaming just to hang out with friends. VShojo had felt like a lifeline for her, a second chance after a difficult past, including her turbulent time in Nijisanji. For Michi, joining VShojo was an opportunity to rebuild, to be surrounded by people she trusted and who seemed to genuinely care. That's why what happened cut so deeply. While the unpaid debt were serious, Michi stressed that her main heartbreak wasn't just about the money, it was about the betrayal. She apologized for not doing more due diligence and thanked her fans for their unwavering support, and pleaded with the company to avoid hate, harassment, or baseless speculations. Instead, she urged everyone to stand by one another and support her fellow talents during this upheaval. Then came Zentreya's stream. Proof that leaving VShojo didn't mean escaping the fallout. She had already walked away from the company, but her words made it clear the collapse's consequences were still hitting hard. Carefully stepping around legal landmines, Zentreya admitted that she likely isn't getting paid and that she's not the only one. Artists, musicians, and other talents have allegedly gone unpaid as well. It's like one of those cartoon rooms filled with red tape, she said, describing the exhausting caution she had to use with every word. Despite her long-standing frustration, she says both staff and fans knew, Zentreya had still believed in the dream. She had hyped the brand, championed the auditions, and brought new faces in, convinced they were building something bigger. But now, she says, she feels stupid, betrayed. While she avoided specifics, one name did come up, Gunrun. I've been screaming at him for years, she said, and nothing changed. Her frustration wasn't just for herself. She called out the injustice done to Ironmouse, Michi, Matara, Kuro, and even the brand new talents like Nova, thrown into chaos before they had a chance to grow. Henya then goes live as well to officially announce her departure from VShojo, revealing that the company still owes her a significant amount of unpaid funds that have been outstanding for quite some time.
So, I have made the decision that I'm leaving VShojo, and unfortunately, VShojo owes me significant amount of unpaid debt that I haven't been paying in a long time.
She describes the situation as heartbreaking. She had trusted VShojo, and this betrayal left her deeply unsettled. A few years ago, she had been ready to quit VTubing entirely, but joining VShojo had reignited her hope. Now, having to walk away again, she's devastated. Apologizing to her fans for making them worry, Henya confirms she will continue streaming as an independent VTuber, but just minutes before going live, she learned yet another blow. Her birthday merch still hadn't been shipped. She, her manager, and legal counsel are now handling the situation, and she promises to update fans as soon as she knows more. But unfortunately, it seems this merch will never be shipped, and she encourages her fan to request a chargeback. And that's when the dam finally broke. One by one, systematically, every remaining talent began stripping VShojo from their username. They were all quitting. It was like watching the lights go out in real time. Handles changing, bios being scrubbed, and within just 48 hours, the official VShojo checkmarks had also vanished from their profiles. On the other hand, K9 Kuro's stream offered a raw and weary reflection on his time with VShojo. While he opened with a few light jokes, it was clear these moments of humor were masking a deeper disappointment. He described his first year at VShojo as a dream: smooth operations, consistent support, and what he called the best contract he'd ever signed. But the second year, that's when the cracks begun to show. The collabs became fewer, the promises piled up without follow-through, and the company stopped feeling like a team. Kuro admitted he stayed longer than he should have. Not because he didn't see the warning signs, but because they kept telling him things would get better. When he finally learned the full extent of the financial mismanagement, unpaid sponsorship deals, missing merch revenue, not just for him, but for others as well, everything fell apart. He revealed he hadn't been paid for his debut merch until 2 years later, and that only happened because internal staff fought for it. When he asked to terminate his contract, he was told it would take a day, yet over 10 days passed without a single update. For Kuro, this wasn't just mismanagement, it was outright neglect, and once the charity money issue surfaced, that was the final straw. As he put it, "You don't fuck with charity, dude." And that line said it all. But Made Min stream added another unexpected layer to the unraveling. We did not expect that one. I don't think anybody did. While many knew she was close with certain VShojo talents, few realized just how involved she had actually been with the company itself. As she spoke live on stream, it became clear this wasn't just a friend reacting to the fallout. This was someone who had worked behind the scene within the company for over a year, and now she was ready to tell her story. So last year, Min says she and Matara co-hosted a podcast. She wasn't a VShojo member at the time, but she was collaborating with the company, releasing merch and other projects together. Despite that, she claims she never saw any of the revenue from those merch drops. It wasn't really about that for me, she explains, so she simply brushed it off. She and Matara still received their Patreon share, at least. During a trip to Japan, Mint confided in Matara that she was feeling lonely and wanted to be part of a group or company. VShojo seemed like it could be a good fit, even though it wasn't her main priority. That's when the idea emerged: pitch an idol group generation to VShojo. Gunrun seemed interested, and from that point forward, Mint says she was technically signed on as a member. Auditions were held for 2 other members. Mint says she was confident they'd be working mostly with VShojo Japan. Progress was slow though, but not bad, so she felt optimistic. There were many opportunities lined up, some of which she admits will probably never come to fruition now, but their debut kept being delayed, which at first made sense, but eventually became frustrating when it affected planning for projects. VShojo also assisted with a second merch drop, and yet again she says she never received any of the money from it. Still, she kept telling herself it'll be okay, it'll work out. I wasn't an outward-facing talent, she says, but I guess I was a talent for over a year. She ends by saying many of the staff and former staff she worked with were good people and that they only learned what was happening very recently. Eventually, the team broke the news to her, and Mint apologized for the trouble and asked that people continue to support the talents moving forward. So now that most talents from VShojo had openly admitted or discovered they were owed unpaid wages, many fans began looking back at earlier departures with a fresh set of eyes. If you've been in the VTuber scene for a while, you might remember that in 2023, Vebe, Silvervale, and Nanners all left the agency around the same time. Back then, rumors were flying. There seemed to be tension between certain talents, and one major event that year split public opinion: the Hogwarts Legacy controversy. Silvervale faced heavy backlash from parts of the internet for playing the game. I've covered that whole saga in other videos, like my Pippa video and my Henia video, so I won't rehash it here. But what matters for VShojo is this: the 3 talents left just a few months later. Naturally, people speculated. Some thought there was bad blood between Silvervale and Ironmouse because of moments like this clip.
Are you and Masse still friends? I've seen this question a lot in the chat, and I don't want to I don't know, man. What is a friend? Is it someone that doesn't talk to you for 7 months? I don't know. Next question.
There was more, of course, but I won't go too deep into unconfirmed stuff. It was a turbulent time filled with uncertainty. Eventually, Vey posted a tweet explaining her reasons for leaving, stressing it wasn't about other talents, but because the new contracts made no financial sense. She ended her post with a piece of advice for indies: always have a lawyer review contracts, especially one who knows industry standards. At the time, that line barely got attention, but in hindsight, with what we know now, it reads very differently. It turns out even back then there were signs of a deeper trouble. Vebe hinted at it in a very wink-wink way, as you can see here.
You know, I'm still under an NDA, so I cannot legally ever, no matter what, talk ever. Do with that what you want to do. I cannot say anything. I cannot say how I feel about it. Let's just say a lot of companies don't make you sign stuff like that. So I wonder why. Tell us in emojis. Okay, I'm gonna motion to you guys with my mouth. That's how I feel about it.
And in the wake of Ironmouse's video this year, Vey tweeted, "Looks like nothing's changed between 2023 and 2025 in terms of how the org's management moves, Lamau. Couldn't and still can't say shit because of their god-awful NDA that I had to sign. I legally can't badmouth the company, but at least everyone now knows the reason why I left." But Nanners, another ex-VShojo talent, does more than that. She goes live on stream and finally opens up about her time at VShojo, and what she reveals is truly shocking. And I'm gonna say that word often in this video, but it's appropriate. She says that talents currently speaking out inspired her and calls them brave, wishing them all the best. She herself is very angry, claiming it sucks we all put our trust in these people, we believed in them. And even back then when she joined, there were problems, but she still stayed because she actually believed in their mission and wanted everything to be successful. She believed in the dream and the feeling of being part of a family. But one of the most devastating revelations, at the time she left VShojo, they owed her an amount equivalent to a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, a luxury vehicle that typically costs around $117,000 in the US. That's more than the average annual salary in the country, which sits around $59,000 to $65,000. It was one of the major reasons for her departure. She also shared a harrowing story about being swatted during a sponsored stream, where law enforcement showed up to her home mid-broadcast. And despite the terror of that moment, she had to keep smiling and joking on camera to avoid alerting the swatters that it had worked. The trauma from that incident still haunts her to this day. And she says she kept telling herself, at least I'll be paid. But then she wasn't, because VShojo never paid her for that stream. When she asked about payment, they claimed they didn't have her payment info, despite having sent her money just 2 weeks earlier. After leaving the company, she made more money in a few months than she had made in years at VShojo, in part because they had failed to pay her for so many things. But she also revealed that at the time of her and Vey's departure, VShojo had an expired business license, which played a role in allowing them to exit. She also says that she was discouraged discouraged from using a lawyer, and when she did, it was used against her. She was mocked as being heartless for communicating through legal representation, and after she and others left, the remaining talents were told they were troublemakers or were outright lied to. She says she was painted in an unsavory light. Vey, who was in her chat at the time, confirmed that part of the company's terms for her exit included synchronizing her and Silvervale's departure announcements to avoid causing panic and make it seem like it was mutual, even though it wasn't. Vey also speculated that the company may have used sponsor funds from other talents to pay off debts, like taking out a loan to repay another loan. And according to Vey, they weren't paid for sponsors' work between 2021 and 2023. And the narrative that they left because of boyfriends was pushed by VShojo fans as a deflection. Nanners emphasized that Atol, her boyfriend, never influenced her decision and didn't deserve the rumors thrown at him back then. She recalls that her lawyer was audibly horrified when reviewing the VShojo contract, sighing and saying, "Some of this is ridiculous." On corporations in general, Nanners warned that some may encourage or even astroturf false narratives to protect their image. A statement she left vague, probably intentionally. On the missing Ironmouse charity funds, though, she asked who steals from charity and calls the act comically evil, especially considering Mouse only ever wanted the company to succeed. Finally, she gives high praise to Panini, that former staff member who left, and felt bad that some staff thought she disliked them after leaving. She reiterates that VShojo owes everything to its talents. She thought with the new wave of talents like Henya, maybe the company had changed or improved their contract, but it seems they hadn't. She ends her stream by saying she never thought she'd ever talk about any of this. She thought she'd take this to her grave, but after watching the company burned, it felt like it was finally time to speak. And after all of that, the stress, the silence, the trauma, Nanners followed up with a heartfelt message on Twitter. She thanked the community for their support and admitted how isolated and burnt out she had felt over the past 2 years. Speaking out wasn't easy, but the overwhelming response gave her the closure she thought she'd never have. It was an incredibly difficult time for me that left me feeling so isolated and mentally burnt out. I thought I'd never be able to talk about this. She ended with hope, asking fans to support those affected and donate to the Immune Deficiency Foundation. Even in the aftermath, Nanners looked ahead. But next came Silvervale. And before going live, Silvervale posted a tweet that hinted at the gravity of what she was about to reveal. She said that she had signed a pretty aggressive NDA, and even adding that they made her mom sign one too. She warned, "It's been bad for a long time. It was so much worse than you could imagine." This tweet was only the beginning. What came next in her stream would leave the entire community speechless. So just to give you a little bit of insight, this wasn't just any talent speaking out. This was one of VShojo's founding members as well. Someone who poured years of her life into the company, finally breaking the silence. During the height of the Hogwarts Legacy controversy, when Silvervale was being relentlessly harassed online, she had a private call with Gunrun, someone she once admired. And what he told her? That she was a disappointment, harmful to the brand, and that her harassment was an inconvenience to the other talents. He instructed her not to talk to them. And then she was told not to stream. They claimed it wasn't a suspension, saying that they weren't that kind of agency, but as she puts it, what else would you call this?
And this broke me. Like, it shattered my perception of everything, and it shattered my trust, and it just fucking broke me, man. Like, I have been a part of this agency since the beginning, the literal beginning. Like, I was a founding member. I had put in so much effort and time and love into, like, seeing it grow, and to be treated so harshly with no remorse by someone so important to me just ruined me. And when I needed their support the most, I was met with contempt, and that just broke me.
Silver says they, referring to Nanners, Vey, and her, were painted as troublemakers, problem people, and greedy just for asking what they rightfully deserved. As she put it, so many horrible things just to avoid the truth that they were stealing from us. The company even timed the announcements for their departure. Silver and Vey's departure were publicized together, while Nanners' exit was stalled because it would look bad. Silver says plainly they held her hostage. She then learned that that she'd been slandered behind her back to musicians, sponsors, partners, and artists she had worked with through VShojo. Their legal power was undeniable. We had a non-disparaging agreement, and I could have never handled that legal battle. They were huge, with a lot of power. And every time she expressed stress, even in Discord, they got her lawyer involved and threatened to sue her if she hinted at being unhappy or even wanting to leave.
You may not realize it, but they were terrifying. Like, the threat of them suing me was very real, and it haunted me for a really, really, really long time. Like, even before it was announced that I was leaving, I had just mentioned in my Discord, just like casually, that I was stressed and I needed to cancel the stream, and they contacted my lawyer because of that and threatened to sue me if I hinted that I was leaving or unhappy at all, just because I said I was stressed. So imagine me saying anything else. Like, they were watching me like a hawk. I think they were watching all of us. Because we were the first ones. We were the first ones to leave.
She revealed the original contract lacked an exit clause, a detail she finally fought to add later. And not just to her contract, mind you, but to every talent's contract. I did notice there was no exit clause, which should have been a huge red flag, she adds. She also shared how much money was owed. Before I left VShojo, they owed me tens of thousands of dollars, like a metric fuck ton of money. Sponsor payments like Smite, Advanced GG, and Iron Sound PC were never paid out, among many others. When she sought even minor contract adjustments, she says she was belittled and dismissed. We were villainized for that. She detailed how VShojo pitted talents against each other, leaderboards, restricted sponsor communications, and enforced isolation. They were not allowed to talk to each other about contract details. You were considered a problem person for rocking the boat or voicing any concerns. It felt like we were working for them. It wasn't until she joined Mythic that things started to change for her. I made more money in the first few months of Mythic than my entire time at VShojo, which is insane. And this was mostly because they had failed to pay her for so many projects. She didn't mince words at all when asking, where did the money go? How many ads did you buy? Were they made out of gold? And finally, one of her most vulnerable admissions. This is the worst experience I've ever gone through. My world was destroyed. I felt so isolated. I was so burnt out and so sad. I tried not to show it to you guys. I thought I would take this to my grave. It feels surreal to be able to talk about it now. But while Silvervale was grieving the end of something she once believed in, others were facing a different kind of heartbreak, one built on broken promises. Meet Tori Oriane, a VTuber who was supposed to be part of VShojo's next generation. Remember those auditions they were prepping where they promised us they would debut some hidden gems? Well, that would have been her. She went through a grueling 6-month audition process, signed a contract, and poured thousands of dollars into building a brand she was told would debut under the company. For 7 months, she was kept in the dark, communicating with only one staff member, holding on to promises of a debut that was always just around the corner.
After being told time and time again that I didn't need to worry, that I would get to debut, and that I would receive a budget, I decided to shift my efforts into building what would become my brand under VShojo, keeping staff in the loop along every step of the way. I finalized my character design. Staff told me they had no issues or input for my design I sent over. I reached out to model artists and riggers. I found an artist who agreed to work with me. I asked staff if there were any issues with working with this artist, and I was told no, so production began on the model art in June. It was then told to me that the allotted debut budget may need to be reevaluated. I sent. If the budget is timing related, I don't mind fronting the cost until it can be reimbursed down the line. I was quoted $1,000. I can just provide receipts for the work to be compensated at a later date, if of course that's easier. I was never given an answer for this. Once again, I reconfirmed if a debut would be happening. At this point, I didn't mind paying fully out of pocket if it meant I was debuting. I considered it as investing in myself. Time and time again, I was reassured we would be debuting, so I genuinely had no issue with fronting these costs.
She wasn't even allowed to promote herself properly under her indie identity. Her growth stagnated, but she didn't complain. She believed she was building towards something real.
I attended the June 2025 Off-Kai in person, and here I learned a lot more than what the staff was communicating to me at this point. I kept hearing whispers of VShojo financial concerns. This concept was unheard of to me.
And here's where it gets devastating. Tori didn't find out the truth from VShojo. No official meeting, no internal update, not even in DM. No. She found out at Offkai, a VTuber convention, when she overheard hushed conversations behind the scenes that her dream job, everything that she had been planning for, would never concretize.
As of the past few weeks, for the first time, I was told there was a strong possibility I would not be debuting despite the constant reassurance the past 7 months due to these financial complications.
Imagine if she hadn't gone to that convention. She might still be sitting in silence, waiting for a dream that was never going to happen. VShojo never told her. She had to hear it from the grapevine. Despite being down 5 figures in debut expenses and nearly a year of her life, VShojo never publicly acknowledged her, never even offered an apology, and also never refunded a cent. And still, she remains painfully humble.
I suppose that's why I'm releasing this statement. I just wanted someone to acknowledge what I've been through and see that I did make it in VShojo, even if I will never debut.
Tori wasn't the only one. Another aspiring VTuber, Pia P, also passed the VShojo audition and was set to debut as part of their next generation. But like Tori, her dreams were quietly dismantled behind the scenes, and for months, no one knew why, until now. After 4 years of blood, sweat, and slime, I really believed I'd made it. She poured everything into this chance, turning down other opportunities, believing in the company, trusting their promises, but it all fell apart when she learned about what happened with Ironmouse's charity funds. That was the breaking point. She said she couldn't, in good conscience, move forward with the contract. It became clear that many of those promises wouldn't be kept, and a lot of us are now left shouldering the cost of decisions we didn't make. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part, I've been doing my best to smile through the storm, but the truth is, it's been raining on me for a long time. Even now, Pia says she still believes in the dream they all shared, but she's left sweeping up the broken pieces of her career, her identity, and a future that was taken from her before it even begun. And then came various testimonies of people who had auditioned but never got in. Most of these stories follow a disturbingly similar pattern. VTubers strung along with false promises only to be ghosted or quietly told it wasn't going to happen after all. Some were even given money afterward, whether as a consolation prize or to keep quiet. It's hard to say. Another aspiring VTuber who came forward was Phoebe, who had also been accepted into VShojo following the public auditions. Like many others, she was left in the dark and told she couldn't stream under her own name, given vague timelines, and only ever communicated with a single staff member. Despite having signed a contract, months passed with no onboarding, no production, and no updates. She eventually discovered through unofficial channels that she might not debut after all. Phoebe emphasizes that she isn't trying to cause drama, but she just wants her story to be known. How she stayed silent for so long, holding on to the hopes that things would eventually move forward, only to be left behind. Next, we hear from Momo, one of the earliest known cases of VShojo stringing along a talent only to leave them in the dark. In her stream, she reflects on her experience from late 2019 into 2020. At the time, she was under contract, prepping everything for her debut. And then suddenly, VShojo pulled the plug with vague reasoning citing financial changes and told her to reapply in the fall, a slap in the face after they'd already signed her.
After I spent money and time like prepping to become a part of it, the worst, I think the most hurtful part of it was like obviously them being like, oh, sorry, you're no longer, you know, of interest to us, obviously. Also the part where they were like, hey, you know, reapply in the fall.
What followed was a long, painful silence. They didn't even terminate her contract for over a year and a half, during which she wasn't paid and received barely any communication.
And that was probably the worst. Like, left in silence, having to think to myself, trying to figure out what the fuck I did wrong.
At one point, she compares the situation to being headhunted by a law firm, only to get ghosted after signing.
Yeah, imagine if you, like, applied at, like, a law firm or, like, a business like that. What? Not even apply. They come to you, right? They come to you and they're like, man, we really like the way you're a lawyer. We really like this shit that you do. Come work for us. Come be with us. They give you the offer. Have you sign a 2-year contract? and then say, ooh, sorry.
And to this day, it still affects how she sees herself as a creator. She says she was so full of excitement and passion, but what happened to her broke her.
I was so excited and so full of fire and so full of like passion, you know? I was so excited. I was so full of passion. And then that happened and it just, I don't know, man. It broke me.
If her story proves anything, is that VShojo had already, as far back as 2019, started their pattern of shady behavior. Next, we need to talk about Sayu, formerly Zion Lenza from Niji Sanji. She recently opened up about her own interaction with VShojo and how during one of the most difficult periods of her life, the company offered her what felt like a lifeline, only to abandon her. She explains that shortly before her termination from Niji Sanji, a friend who knew Gunrun personally offered to connect them. Sayu met with both this friend and Gunrun in person and shared everything about the mistreatment she witnessed at Niji Sanji, how talents were given only a small percentage from merge, and how hopeless it felt to speak up, and how trapped she and others were. She then pitched an idea. What if she and other ex-Niji members left together and formed a new generation under VShojo? To her surprise, Gunrun was interested. He asked her who else might be willing to join and even introduced her to a manager so she could share the story again. At that moment, Sayu said she felt relief and hope, like someone was finally going to help, but that hope would soon vanish. After her termination and doxing, Sayu heard nothing. No follow-up, no help, and no offer. When she reached out months later, Gunrun acted like they had never spoken, giving her only a surface-level response. She was left to spiral alone like many others and questioning her own worth. I felt like I wasn't worth saving. I felt like I had no value. I felt like, why just me, left out? And really, what was the point? What was the point of pretending they would onboard her, of giving someone who was already struggling so badly false hopes, especially when she was still deciding whether to leave? It would have been better to be honest with her and the other talents from the start. Instead, they let her believe there was a future, only to discard her the moment it became inconvenient. But it wasn't just Sayu or Momo or Maidment. More and more VTubers have now come forward with these stories of being strung along by VShojo, sometimes for months, only to be left with nothing.
They said, yeah, thanks for your interest, thanks for meeting up with us, thanks for your time. We can't move forward right now. After I left my agency, after I had given them a timeline, after I've met up with them twice, after you were asking around about me, and the reason this pissed me off is two things. One, if I was dumb and I left my old agency for the sake of joining them under this like false pretense or promises or seeming like conversation that was had in person where they were saying, yeah, we're interested in you. We want to know what you want from us. If I would have left my agency just for that and then they would have pulled this, I would have been completely like I would have been screwed over. Now, like I said, I've done entertainment since I was 13. I know how these false promises go. I didn't expect it 100% because I never signed anything.
Quinn, formerly known as Kyoka Neko from Niji Sanji, says he was actively courted by VShojo before leaving his agency. They told him they'd move forward once he was independent, and when that time finally came, they backpedaled. Surprise, surprise, no explanation, just a polite rejection email like none of it ever happened. Buff Pup too had a similar experience, but with even more emotional weight. She recalls how her entire friend group applied to VShojo together, and after waiting over a year with no real communication, her friend Rose finally made it to the last round, only to be told that the auditions were being scrapped entirely. As a sorry, VShojo offered a $500 merch voucher.
The part that gets me is that because they like canceled it, they were like, hey, would you like a $500 voucher? For wasting your time.
That moment marked the beginning of Buff Pup's deep mistrust of VTuber corporations. She says VShojo never felt like a real business, just a bunch of guys playing businessmen with monopoly money, stringing along vulnerable talents with vague promises and bad management. On July 23rd, a user named CL, who's mostly a trader and occasional shitposter, dropped a bombshell on Twitter. A $2 million buyout offer for VShojo had been rejected by one of his friend, just 1 month before the implosion we're seeing now. According to their post, the offer came through on July 21st, but the operation was already deeply unprofitable. The OP claimed their friend was the largest investor in VShojo and had now lost everything. They alleged that investors collectively burned through almost $10 million chasing growth, trying to make the VTubers big without building a sustainable revenue model. The company, they said, lost millions every single year until it eventually fell into debt. And now they couldn't even pay that debt back, which is why staff, contractors, and partners allegedly went unpaid. It also raised questions about where large sums of money went, including the $500,000 from Ironmouse's charity donation that still hadn't been delivered. And when you look at it from this angle, the picture is clear. VShojo's spending was massive, reckless, and its business model was fundamentally unprofitable. And if all of that wasn't messy enough, the financial trail took an even stranger turn when serious allegations surfaced against VShojo's own co-founder, Justin Ignacio, better known as Gunrun. In a scathing tweet, gaming community figure Hero17 claimed he personally helped secure millions in funding for Gunrun, money intended to support him after past mistreatment, and even contributed 3.5 million of his own. According to Hero, that money was later used to build VShojo, only for the company to become mired in the same kind of mistreatment and betrayal it was meant to rise above. And through all of this, talents like Zentreya and Queson were still publicly begging Gunrun, the CEO of VShojo, to say something, anything. Fans were convinced that with the situation spiraling, a response was inevitable. They couldn't possibly stay silent forever, right? And then it finally happened. After all this wait, VShojo finally drops the response. Written by Gunrun, predictably he announces that VShojo is officially shutting down, but the rest of the statement feels more like a PR spin than true accountability. He says he spent the past few months trying to fundraise and right the ship. Yet, from everything we've now learned, these issues didn't start a few months ago. And instead of preparing the talents for reality, it seems most of his energy went into keeping them unaware of just how bad things had gotten. Then comes the part where he tries to frame their history as some kind of noble experiment, boasting about the $11 million they raised in 2022 to pursue a bold, talent-first approach, as he writes, with generous splits, debut investments, infrastructures, concerts, events, and staffing, all while maintaining talent freedom and IP ownership. But we already know some talents weren't paid since 2021, so this problem had started before they had even raised this venture capital. And it's hard to call it a talent-first agency when the people the brand was built on were last in line to be paid, while staff and executives still collected their checks. At this point, calling it talent freedom feels like pure LARPing. Freedom without pay is just exploitation. The most glaring omission is how he addresses the missing charity money. Rather than naming Ironmouse or the $500,000 that went missing, he hides behind this vague wording like money intended for a charitable initiative that he later learned about. This is despite the fact that he personally boosted her subathon for the charity, something later noted in a community note on this very post. Whether this was the result of catastrophic bookkeeping or something far more deliberate, neither possibilities reflects well on leadership. He closes by saying they tried to raise additional investment, almost certainly referring to the $2 million buyout we just discussed, and insists he firmly believed they'd be able to secure it. When that failed, so did the company. The one thing he does say right is that he takes full responsibility for his decisions that led here. But what are words like that worth after years of unpaid wages, missing charity funds, secrecy, and betrayal? Needless to say, the statement wasn't received very well, with multiple talents replying to it. In case on tweeting, "Why didn't you let us know the moment you realized the situation? Why did I get the information 2 weeks ago, not from the company, but from my home girls? Why did you lie to the JP branch a week ago that everything was good and taken care of?" And Ironmouse, "You broke my heart, my spirit, and my trust." Hania also responded, Granted, I had a wonderful time while I was there, so because of that, it hurts my heart a lot. My community and my friends don't deserve this. I don't expect you to do anything at this point. Just please don't do this ever again to anyone. And ex-talents chiming in too, like Silvervale. How did you not know? How could you betray the people that trusted you the most and think anyone would believe this garbage? You ruined lives. I hope the money gets repaid, but I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't. You're a disgrace and a disappointment. Zentraya's post hit like a gun punch, raw, unfiltered, and dripping with years of pent-up frustration toward Gunrun and VShojo's leadership. She lays out how her repeated attempts to get a one-on-one conversation with Gunrun were met with corporate brush-offs, if not outright dodging. Even when she was under intense community pressure during the VShojo auditions I spoke about in the beginning of the video, pleading for PR statements to take the weight off of her, she says she was told it wasn't needed. Instead, Gunrun put out a small, vague video, making himself look hurt and apologetic, while leaving her to weather the backlash all alone. She recalls smiling through the pain, continuing to push the company forward despite being kept in the dark about major hires, new talents debuts, and decisions she says were driven by financial gain rather than genuine support. When Amelie joined, she begged for a statement about auditions before Amelie's debut stream, only to be ignored again. In the end, she and Amelie had to handle the PR themselves because, in her words, VShojo's team was unfit for their job. The toll wasn't just professional, it was personal. She describes sleepless nights, constant harassment, and a crushing realization that she had been fighting for a company that just didn't care for her. She accuses Gunrun of spending money VShojo didn't have without warning the talents, and directly calls him out for knowing full well that the missing charity funds were meant to be untouched. Her final question hangs heavy. Where did $11 million go in less than 3 years? What happened to all that money? And if that wasn't enough, Giga's response came in swinging as well. No sugarcoating, no softening, just pure heat. VShojo didn't just fail, she writes. Many staff and leadership failed VShojo. Instead of using talent money on operating costs, the company should have shut down or at least informed us. But you used us as cash cows to keep things afloat while keeping us in the dark. You chose to keep the expensive sinking ship going and felt that it was fine to keep paying out the staff you were friends with instead of putting talent first. You've made it abundantly clear that you are okay with not prioritizing the debts owed to the talents who made this company what it is. While saying you will take full responsibility is the correct thing to do, I also think there are many others in the company without the same positive intent as conveyed in this message. In every leadership or staff call I had, you sat back and didn't say much while you had other staff members that were clearly the ones doing the actual work be the ones to speak. We know which leadership worked on our contracts. We know which leadership constantly sat in VC playing games with staff instead of working on time-sensitive tasks for our events and debuts. We know which staff consistently leaked information about talent. As for the CEO, you are the final check, yes, but this means that all checks before you fail too. And following the VShojo announcement, Twitch swiftly removed the Gunrun emotes from its website. Error Twitch W, I might say. But once the company officially imploded, the floodgates opened. With NDAs now harder for VShojo to enforce, former talent started speaking out. Vebe was one of them, and she dropped one hell of a bombshell thread on X. And so our NDAs are now void, she writes. Why I left VShojo. Back in 2023, VShojo tried to bully me into one of the most predatory contracts that I have ever seen. When I tried to ask more about it, their COO got extremely hostile with me and refused to answer any of my questions. And so I had to hire a lawyer in order to get some clarifications. During the talks, it became clear that VShojo would rather let me go than to take less away from me. They were ultimately wanting me to give up more than half of all my sponsor revenue and over 60% of all merch sales. All I asked for them in return is to not take a cut of the sponsor that I was getting through Mythic, as that cut was already being taken. And just for clarification, Mythic is a sponsorship agency that already takes a cut of the deals it brings in. Vebe's point being that VShojo wanted to take a cut of those earnings too, even though they didn't secure the deals themselves. She continued, they said no, they wanted it all, and so I asked to leave after being treated like I was disposable in our talks. They basically made it seem like they were my employer and that they're the reason for my success, that I owed them, and that I should be happy to give them my money in order for me to leave. They demanded I sign an NDA that prevented me from speaking to any of the other talents about it. I could not say why I was leaving. I could not say what the terms that I was saying no to were. I even got in trouble for advising them to hire their own attorneys. They would watch my streams, read my Discord, and then threaten to sue me if I said anything that hinted towards how I really felt about the company. I was threatened with a lawsuit. And this eerily lined up with what Silvervale had revealed earlier, that she too was threatened with lawsuits for merely expressing anxiety in her own Discord. Vebe then revealed that when she and Silver left, VShojo insisted on announcing both departures on the same day to minimize damage, while the COO allegedly spread a narrative on 4chan and other platforms claiming she was leaving to join OTK and painting both her and Silvervale as troublemakers the company was letting go. So this was what Nanners was referring to about companies astroturfing. She wasn't done though. They dropped even more. Nanners allegedly wanted to leave around the same time over contract issues, but was told she couldn't because it didn't fit the company's internal and external narrative. She says she discovered only after signing her NDA that she had never been paid for certain sponsors and still hasn't been fully paid back 2 years later. VShojo also demanded she repays $10,000 for anniversary assets which arrived months late and half finished. Their company lawyer, believed to be the COO, allegedly had an expired law license. Nanners even mocked this publicly in this tweet, saying, "So is the COO gonna say anything about his involvement, or is he busy googling how do I renew my law license past the deadline?" According to Vebe, the company pitted talents against each other, pushed and forced streaming schedules to manipulate view counts, and constantly trashed other VTuber agencies, especially Hololive. She says Hololive lived rent-free in Gunrun's head, and that VShojo was convinced Hololive was over after signing Queson and Zuna, formerly Mikaneko, going so far as to spend hundreds of thousands on massive Shinjuku billboards. Her allegations didn't stop there. Their previous talent manager was ghosted by Gunrun for 6 months and told not to work, and then fired for not doing anything. The CMO, MTD, was allegedly reprimanded for being creepy towards talents, told not to privately message them, and later accused by other streamers of trash talking Vebe after she left. She closed her thread by thanking those who stood by her alongside Silver and Nanners when they needed it the most. And then cheekily adds, "They'll have to steal from another charity to sue me, lol." But Nanners had also a bit more to say about MTD. MTD had the audacity to talk shit about you to my face at a party the year that we all left, and painted you as some kind of conniving, greedy mean girl who was in my ear and manipulated me into leaving VShojo just because you wanted me to join OTK, because her boyfriend Soda is part of that org, or for personal gain or some shit. He got uncomfortably close and up in my face and was like, "Come on, I know the real reason you left. I know it was because of Vey. She talked you into it, etc." And it was infuriating. I know he spread that same shit to other staff, talent, or other industry people. Seeing one of my closest friends get dragged through the mud like this for years was awful. You did absolutely nothing wrong and had so much shit flung at you just because they wanted to push a narrative to protect the company. For him to act like he's completely blameless is insulting. He is a creepy motherfucker, and there's a lot more obviously, but a lot of it is also not my story to tell. During this time, Nanners' boyfriend Atelstan is also live on Twitch, and while streaming, he reads through Vebe's post and makes it clear he agrees with several of her points, especially the part about the NDA and how VShojo obsessively monitored Vei's action and everything else she said.
Yeah, if I said anything that hinted towards how I really felt about the company, I was threatened with a lawsuit. Yeah. This was the big thing. This is why it's so hard to have any sense of power over yourself, is because you are under threat of a multi-million-dollar company lawsuit at any point if you speak out.
He also comments on how the company's internal culture was essentially built on lies. Lies that were spun publicly on social media, and lies that were spread internally between talents as well to shape their perceptions.
Later, I found out that Nanners wanted to leave around the same time due to also being unhappy with the contract, but was told that she couldn't because it did not fit their narrative that they were pushing internally and externally. Yes, because Vey and Silver are just offshoots, right? They are the minority. But if Nyan is also leaving, then ooh, there's a lot more speculation that comes with that, right? It looks pretty bad. All three of these like older members are leaving now. Oh, are they all fucking greedy bitches? Well, that's what they tried to make it seem like. The amount of hate we've gotten over leaving, from fans calling us greedy bitches to people saying we're abandoning our friends, tossing us out of the company because we're successful enough. Shit was fucking painful. Not being able to say anything sucked. Yeah, and then you have that same side going on within VShojo of people lying and saying, yo, this person hates you. This person doesn't like you. This person doesn't care if you're getting harassed. It's like lies on both sides.
But then he gets to the part of Vay's tweet talking about VShojo's former CMO, MTD, and his reaction says it all.
Oh my god, here we go! The cat is out of the fucking bag! MTD got reprimanded for being creepy to us. LOL, got told not to message us privately, go figure. This motherfucker, dude, has the audacity. Gunrun, what the fuck, dude? Oh, so you didn't know about any of this when you fucking said all that shit you said to Nyan, you fucking loser ass bitch?
But that's not all. While on stream, he receives a message from Ironmouse in chat telling him, if someone doesn't work there anymore, I should be able to say something about what they used to tell me. And then she tells him, check DMs. And that's when he very validly crashes out.
Oh wait, Masse, I got you, bro. Oh my fucking god! I hate that fucking cuck loser bitch! Dude, I fucking hate that guy. Oh my god. Dude, I just can't take it. I really can't take it. I'm not even surprised. I'm not even fucking surprised, Mouse. Like, cause you wanna know, like, he did the fucking same thing to Nyan. He did the same fucking thing, bro. Yo, Gunrun, what the fuck, dude? Shut the fuck up, bitch boy! You're a fucking loser.
After that, he receives another set of messages from her.
I would be told certain things about people. I would feel like I was losing my sanity because they were fine with me and when we spoke, but they would tell me they hated me, so I started questioning my reality. Yeah, that's fucking abuse 101 right there, bro. Like 2 years of like disrupted fucking friendship because of this fucking cuck loser. Even people I worked with, and I was like, what the fuck? How? I just saw them at an event. What do you mean? They would tell me artists hated me. Oh my god, bro.
Then Atel brings up his own first-hand experience with MTD, one that speaks volume about the kind of behavior being alleged.
I've proved from other streamers attending their IRL parties that Mountain Dew would actively shit-talk me after I left the company. Yep, I saw that firsthand. To paint me in the worst light imaginable. Don't know why you're acting innocent on Twitter, pretending you weren't aware of anything. Can't wait to see all the shit that comes out about you because there's loads, but those aren't my stories to tell. Thanks for reading, and thanks to those who stuck around between then and now. No, I'll say it. He does the thing that's really creepy to me when you tell someone you don't want to drink and they are physically forcing you to do so. That is one of my biggest fucking pet peeves ever, okay? I get to a certain point, I don't like to drink. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it, especially when it's fucking straight up tequila shots. And I sure as fuck don't like being forced by anyone to do it. Because I've had that happen to me in my own personal life too, and it's one of the worst, most powerless feelings you'll ever feel. It is just fucking awful. And this motherfucker, it just would not stop. It was one of the creepiest interactions with someone that I've met in this space ever. And that's like, that is the least worst thing that he did that night. Who's this MTD guy? It's Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew. He was whatever the fuck in VShojo. I don't even know what it is. I think he just fucking 4chan poster. I think that was his title. 4chan astroturfing and DM talent late at night. I think that was what he's going to be putting on his LinkedIn.
And looking back at Mewtwo, Mountain Dew. Oh, fuck it. I'm just going to call him Mountain Dew. His tweet history shows some, let's just say, less than professional moments. Additionally, a Blue Sky user who had spoken with both Mountain Dew and Gunrun resurfaced on Twitter to share their own experience. They explained that they had been friends with Mountain Dew for many years before he co-founded VShojo, and later worked as a merch and asset artist for the company. While nothing in the DMs they posted was outright scandalous, the tone carried an unmistakable air of arrogance and self-importance, the kind of I'm the smartest guy in the room energy that, in hindsight, feels all too familiar for this particular set of staff. As for their experience with Gunrun, the artist described him as unprofessional and flaky to work with, and always late on payments. Go figure. They also revealed they were the one who designed VShojo's 3D chibi models, but instead instead of being allowed to use their own style, they were specifically told to mimic the style of Wolfie, the artist behind Hololife's iconic small shibis. In the art world, that's generally considered a huge faux pas when commissioning work, since it essentially asks one artist to copy another's signature style rather than bringing their own creative touch. Later on, indie VTuber Tobbs also talks about her own experience meeting Mountain Dew, and that guy seemed like one hell of a special case.
I guess during MagFest, he went up to me and he just thought it was really funny to make a bunch of Jew jokes to my face. And I was just kind of like, first of all, you know what? If I can have some friends that can make those, but it's like, I don't even fucking know you. But when I got into the room, he was like, hey man, what's your opinion on Hamas? And I was like, dude, what? But this coked out motherfucker coming up to me, acting like we're close, we're friends, being like, so hey, what about running the media? And I'm like, bro, just call me the K word while you're at it, dude. Like, just say it at this point. I know you want us so bad. Like, be quiet. Like, oh my God, he was just coming up and making all these jokes. And he was like, so what about the Middle East, bro? And I'm like, dude, like, what the fuck? Like, what is this? It's like, no, I don't think that Israel should be killing people with white phosphorus gas. Like, why are you asking me this to get a rise out of me? What is this?
Then DJ Wheat, a former Twitch employee who's known Gunrun for over 20 years, went live to share a surprising business proposition he once received directly from him: a soft offer to join VShojo as CEO.
There was a soft offer to join as VShojo as COO.
Wheat explains why Gunrun approached him.
I think Gunrun was asking me because, like, Gunrun's expertise has always been on the tech side of things, has always been like having this grand vision and chasing after it, right? Gunrun, I would say, and he would probably agree, like his strength was never necessarily like the macro business operations, or even, I might argue, long-term scale operations sustainability.
But here's the strange part. At the time, VShojo already had a COO.
But at the time, there was an existing COO. And I was like, hey, what's this person do? Like, why do you need a COO if you have a COO?
During their talks, Wheat urged Gunrun to solidify a proper 5-year plan to ensure VShojo's long-term sustainability, but he quickly picked up on red flags, namely what he called a non-COO-COO situation, and a meeting with Gunrun and 2 other high-ranked individuals. During this meeting, it became clear to Wheat that these 2 were wildly unqualified for their positions and were mainly there to benefit from the millions raised from investors.
Not only were these 2 individuals that were not Gunrun, like, not only were they not worthy of the titles that they held, but I also got the indication that they didn't want to do jack shit, and they just wanted to be able to tap into this money that has now been raised. And it got to the point where I was like, I would never take this job unless something is done about these 2 individuals.
Wheat made it clear he would never accept the CEO role unless these 2 were dealt with. That's how much of a liability he felt they were to the company's survival. His point boils down to, with Gunrun and these 2 floaters, it was a recipe for disaster. You've got to take that seriously. He then subtly confirmed that one of them was the CMO, Mountain Dew. Wheat believes one of Gunrun's biggest flaws as CEO was avoiding conflict, which meant that these people stayed in positions they shouldn't have.
And I'll admit, like, this is probably a weakness for Gunrun, is that, like, he doesn't really like conflict that much, you know. So I think it was really hard to hear from me, like, you gotta get rid of these guys.
Combining all of this with other accounts paints a clearer picture. VShojo was plagued with incompetence, greed, nepotism, and a total lack of a coherent plan for the investors' money. You gotta really plan that stuff carefully. But after just 3 years, they had burned through $10 million and then some. Despite this, Wheat ends on a somewhat sympathetic note. He says he wants to believe in Gunrun's good intentions and doesn't think he acted maliciously, though he's probably biased after after knowing him for 2 decades. But also, he's a former Twitch employee, so I take everything he says with a grain of salt. But even with the best intentions, Wheat concludes Gunrun's failure to address issues head-on only made the eventual outcome far worse. And I think we can all agree with that. Like, it became a point where VShojo owed so much money to everybody, even I started to worry they might owe me money too. And then we found out that they not only owed money to their talents, artists, and music producers, but also to their investors, probably banks, and even, I kid you not, a Japanese news network who published an article and revealed that they were still missing payments from VShojo. You can't make this stuff up. Next, a Twitter user leaks a VShojo pitch deck. They say they got access to the recent VShojo pitch deck, and some of this stuff is really interesting. The TLDR is that it describes Gunrun as a most well-connected Twitch staff, that they lost $2.5 million in 2024, and even with aggressive growth, they'd still not turn a profit. This includes plans to license out IP, and it also uses the fact that they raised over $11 million for a charity to attract investments, yet doesn't mention anything about the $500,000 meant for Ironmouse Foundation. It also states they have 10 talent managers and their salaries are included with the cost of goods sold. They own 20 to 30 employees, and it claims IP licensing will bring in $2.1 million with nothing to back up the number. And unbelievably included IRL photos of VShojo Nova talents in investors' materials, their faces. VShojo management literally docks their own VTubers to investors. The OP of the thread thankfully blurred the photos and replaced them with cute dog's picture. But still, how is exposing their identities to strangers make any sense whatsoever? For VTubers, anonymity is the entire point. But the arrogance doesn't stop there. VShojo even brags that their contracts are the most desirable in the industry, claiming they're leagues better than Japanese agency, which is a thinly veiled jabs at Niji Sanji, and boasting that top talents are graduating from Japan's biggest corpo just to join them. Of course, it's very easy to make the most desirable contract in the industry if you do not intend to follow anything that's written on the contract. But here's where the pitch really collapses: the numbers. In 2025, VShojo projects just $7.1 million in revenue, which is an annual growth rate of 97%. Compare that to Cover Corp, Hololife's parent company, which usually forecasts a margin of around 10.9% growth rate. This is completely insane. The gap isn't just wide, it's laughable. VShojo is trying to sell investors on a dream, but the math proves it's just complete delusion. And it gets worse. And then comes the strangest flex of all. The pitch deck spotlights an employee named Alex, introduced as a Gen 1 director and director of VShojo Japan Talent. His big credential? He used to work for Hololive. VShojo hires up clearly thought that was enough flex to impress the investors. But this backfired spectacularly. Alex ended up facing backlash not only for his role in VShojo, but also for his supposed involvement in Hololive's infamous Omega project shutdown, and the VTuber that was teased but never debuted. Alex had to step in and clear things up on LinkedIn, saying his position and involvement have been misrepresented due to a misunderstanding and rumors. He clarified that he was never a director of talent at Cover, but rather an advisor and corporate planner, and Cover's executives and talents could confirm that. He explained, despite this, for some reason I was introduced as a Gen 1 director for Hololives in VShojo's materials, which was contrary to the facts. He also clarified the Omega situation. This misinformation also led to confusion with Omega, a person who was questioned by some talents at the time. However, my actual role was to be called in to solve the root of the problem, and I was in a position that ultimately led to the dismissal of Omega. Omega reportedly didn't get along with other talents, which was why that debut never happened. From there, Alex details his choice to join VShojo after considering moving to the US to set up Cover's American branch. He calls it a mistake in hindsight, admits he helped launch VShojo Japan's Nova group and it went super well, but says that he was shocked to learn that Ironmouse and other talents weren't being paid. He further claims that the Japanese branch manager and he had already considered splitting from VShojo VShojo's management because red flags appeared early. Upper management withheld financial documents even during fundraising process where he had to directly speak to investors. He ends his post by expressing deep disappointment at how everything turned out, calling it very regrettable that he ever joined. From there on, the spotlight shifted to Queson, who in real time was piecing together the chaos, getting new scraps of information here and there almost daily, and openly sharing her attempts to make sense of the mess with her audience. In her follow-up Japanese stream,
VShojo の公式から声明が出ました。前回の動画はまだ声明が出てない時に撮ったやつなので、倒産しますとかなんかそういう細かいことは一切書いていなくて、基本的にはふわっとしている。とりあえず失敗しちゃったよ、終わりだよ。お金はチャリティーのお金とかも含めて会社運営のために使ってたんであって、まあ悪意はないよ、知らなかったよみたいな感じなんですけど。いやまず知らなかったわ、さすがに言い訳きつすぎるんじゃないかな。Talent first my ass.
Queson reacts to VShojo's Japan official statement, which he says was vague and avoided admitting any real wrongdoing, and even claimed there was no malice in using charity funds for company operations. Queson openly scoffs at the excuse of ignorance, saying it's too weak to believe, especially when the company had raised over 1.3 billion yen in 2022, and now, just a few years later, it's all gone. She recounts how in the 2 weeks before the announcement, talents were sending urgent questions that were completely ignored. Even the bankruptcy process wasn't explained directly. Instead, 1 hour after the public VShojo statement went out, talents all got a copy-pasted message on Discord outlining the insolvency process and asking them to sign documents confirming unpaid balances.
2週間ぐらい前から会社の様子がちょっとおかしいぞってなって、タレントからバンバン質問来てたのに全部無視して、この声明が出ることもタレントにも知らせず、全部無視した上でこの声明が出た1時間後、タレントのディスコードにコピペ文章が送られてきていました。そこでやっとね、倒産の手続きに入るということが割とはっきりと書いてあります。倒産の手続きをするにあたってどれだけの未払いがあるのかっていうのを法的に確定するために、これからドキュメントを送るんでサインしてください、しなくてもいいけどみたいな、まあしてもしなくても潰れるからっていうことですよね。
Queson admits she no longer knows who was acting with malice and who wasn't. She decided to treat everyone outside the talents as the enemy after being repeatedly lied to. The only exception she names is her personal manager who supported her long before VShojo. Reflecting on lessons learned, she says that the best protection is getting paid up front.
だったのかみたいな、今後どうすればいいのかみたいな話もしております。でやっぱね、騙されないようにするためにはね、結論先払い、これが一番ね強いんじゃないかなと思ってます。お金関係とかはもう絶対ね揉めたくないし、もうお金関係って本当に信頼が崩れるんですよ、一瞬で。だからもう絶対そこで揉めるのは嫌なんで、もう分かった、私がちゃんと仕事しなかったらもうインターネットでこいつは仕事しなかったですよ、クソですよって言っていいから先に払ってくれ。
Money disputes destroy relationships instantly, and she refuses to let that happen again. Viewers often suggest she starts her own company, but she laughs it off, saying she's the poster child for getting scammed and would just be exploited all over again. The betrayal has left her more cynical than ever. She now assumes everyone outside her close circle is a potential threat and warns that in this industry, trust without verification is a weakness. But even in the face of deep financial loss and personal humiliation, she's determined to keep moving forward, supported by her loyal fans, and vows to cut out unnecessary middlemen in future ventures. And hearing that from the fiery woman who once stood tall as Kuro only makes it hit so much harder. VShojo didn't just burn through capital, they burned through mountains of goodwill, squandering trust and credibility like it was nothing. But the more times go by, the more ugly details get unnerved about VShojo, and a few weeks later, Queson is back again with a new video claiming that she was finally reconciled contacted by some of her old VShojo sponsors for new contracts, she told them, just do the same deals as before. Show me the old contract. That's when she made a shocking discovery. The deals weren't what the talents were told at all. For example, VShojo could land a $10,000 sponsorship for a talent. On paper, the contract said 100% of the money should go to the VTuber. But instead, VShojo lied. They would tell the talents the sponsored only paid $6,000, for example, and pocketed the missing $4,000 for themselves, all while pretending to have their best interest in mind. That's not mismanagement, that's stealing. And it doesn't stop here. They also ask sponsors for lodging and additional expenses for both talents and staff without ever telling the VTubers. And of course, they billed it all to the client.
つまり企業さんがこれだけこのタレントさんとお仕事するんだったら出したいですよって言ってる費用の中からもう根こそぎ取れるだけ取ってたわけ。実際に私と一緒に同行してくださったスタッフさんのね渡航費ですとか現地での働いた分の費用っていうのはもちろんねそれは必要なのでいいんですよ。必要なのは全然いいの。取ってください。むしろなのにお前プライベートで来てるのかと思ってたんですけどっていうスタッフさんのやつがプライベートじゃなく普通に私のさ仕事先さんから引かれてたのね。宿泊費とかさお前現地で会ってあ来てたんですかみたいな言ってたけどさお前私のおかげで来れてんじゃん。もうそういうのがもう大量に書いてあってもうね吐きそうになってもう
Queson explains that covering travel costs for the staff who actually worked with her was totally fair and legit. But then she'd arrive at conventions and be surprised to see extra staff she didn't even know were coming. She finally realized what was happening. VShojo was using her name to justify joyrides for unrelated staff, with every penny charged back to the sponsor. And then the hammer dropped. Queson sat down with Hi Guy, an ex-VShojo JP staff member who described how suddenly staff were called to an emergency meeting. The message was simple. We're out of money. We'll release the announcement in 2 hours.
現在無職のハイゴ無職で稼が外れましたまあいきなり、はい、緊急ミーティングです金ありません2時間後に発表しますじゃあっていう感じで公式発表出る2時間前に言われたんですかそうですね
The staff themselves had been lied to, finding out, just like the talents, only when people started sharing their experiences. As Hi Guy puts it, wait, that's not what you told us at all. And then Nazuna, better known as Mikaneko, and before that Uruha Rushia, dropped her own grenade. VShojo, she says, never paid her a cent for merch sales, not for Nendoroid, not for her U2's plush. The plush was up for pre-order from October to November 2023 and shipping in April 2024. The Nendoroid ran even longer and pre-orders closed around September to October 2023, but it was still popping up on Amazon months after her December 29th, 2023 graduation. Some fans didn't get theirs until August 2024, an entire year later and 8 months after she was gone. Then, in a crazy twist of events, after things had finally started to quiet down, MTD himself drops a statement talking about his time at VShojo. He says he had 2 titles, CTO and CMO, and he immediately opens up the statement by making it clear that he was never made aware that talent funds were being intermingled with company-operated expenses. But let's be real, this reads more like a legal statement meant to shield himself from liability in the upcoming VShojo lawsuit than him coming clean in a Google document. He claims he never had access to the bank accounts as well or financial budgets, and that those were handled only by the COO and CEO, as well as the financial department. And while he insists that he has evidence of this, none of it was shown. Convenient. From there on forward, the document mostly comes across as him whining that his ideas weren't listened to. He complains a lot about being sidelined, about only learning of projects after they were already in motion, about being excluded from major decisions like a merger. He says, from the start, I felt as if I was always unfairly sidelined. Any criticism I had always felt as if they fell on deaf ears. Well, boo fucking who. Which, considering what DJ Wheat insinuated about him being incompetent at his job, kind of tracks. Then he drops another odd twist. Despite holding the titles of CTO and CMO, he says he was never actually listed as a board member or officer in official filings. He even provides copies of corporate statements of information showing that only the CEO Gunrun and the COO Daniel Sanders were recognized. So while he was very much seen as an executive by the public, legally, he maintains that his position wasn't formalized. You can tell that he's leaning on this to downplay his liability. On top of that, we also learned that VShojo never had a physical office. Odd. But more importantly though, he reveals a failed merger attempt in 2024. He doesn't explicitly name the company outright, though many online speculated that Brave Group was the company they were supposed to merge with. But the real bombshell here, he shows screenshots revealing that in December 2024, golden parachutes of over $2.5 million each were being prepared for both the CEO Gunrun and the COO Daniel Sanders. That's $5 million total in severance packages. And at the same time, we know that Queson had already stopped receiving payments from her work, mind you. Okay. He also says that he was formally axed on May 1st, 2024 as part of a cost-cutting wave along with 4 other employees, including the financial manager. That doesn't bode too well. He also says that during that meeting, he was made aware that the COO would also step down, and he describes being asked to word his departure statement to make the company look favorable and avoid speculation. So then, Mountain Dew decides to focus on his own project, but he still knew VShojo was running out of money. He knew that VShojo was on a ticking time bomb. In fact, he even messaged Gunrun asking for a heads up in case bad news was coming, since he was afraid it might affect his own launch. But he was brushed off and redirected to another staff called Dew, who was there to act as an in-between between him and Gunrun. Of course, as we now know, shit hit the fan soon after this exchange of messages. MTD makes a point of posting screenshots claiming this was the first time he realized about the unpaid charity funds and the nature of the company's operating budget. But here's what's missing from this document. Nowhere does he address any of the allegations of workplace harassment, bullying, him creeping on talents, or spreading lies about them. Not the rumors of him astroturfing on 4chan, not the part where he allegedly shit-talk ex-talents at parties. He only vaguely says he now believes, quote, some of the information about talents' behaviors and the reason for talents' departures was untrue, and basically blames the founders for feeding him lies, which doesn't even excuse him running around spreading them, mind you. Ultimately, this statement feels like an attempt to wash his hands clean and limit his legal exposure. But the thing is, even if he wasn't on state papers as a formal board member, in the eyes of the community and likely the courts, he was still an executive. He ends by saying he has a lot more evidence, transcripts, filings, and contracts, but we'll see. And then, almost simultaneously, Queson drops another video, and this one is just wild. She explains that VShojo was so broke, they literally couldn't even afford to file for bankruptcy. Because yes, apparently you actually need to pay fees to legally declare that you're broke. Ironic, isn't it? And their solutions? Asking talents to cover those fees. And how did they do that? By telling talents to buy back the unshipped merch from them. Double dipping. First, by selling merch to fans and not shipping it, and then by asking the talents to purchase the leftover stock. Absolutely insane. Even now, new details are still surfacing daily, and not just for us. The talents themselves are learning things in real time. Giga opened up about just how chaotic the VShojo merge situation really was. Ironmouse says even her lawyers aren't getting responses from the company, and that there were even a few conventions she was being ghosted from that ended up turning out that it was in fact VShojo ghosting the convention and not the other way around, resulting in loss of these opportunities. Natara reveals she's been through similar struggles herself, and this is only for the stuff they are able to talk about. I guarantee you that once the legal proceedings are over, we are going to learn a lot more horrifying stuff about this company. But even through all of this, there's a silver lining. Friendships, once fractured, have been rekindled. Some talents, after years of being apart, are finally speaking honestly and openly again. And those aspiring VShojo members who had their dreams crushed, they banded together, launching their own collab stream under the fitting name Monster Girl. And perhaps most inspiring of all, the community stepped up where the company had failed. In an incredible show of solidarity, fans raised over $1.355 million. It was as if the company said, VShojo won't do it, hold my beer. And if you also want to contribute to the Immune Deficiency Foundation, you can do so directly via Tiltify by checking out the panel on the right side of the video. It's really in moments like these that we're reminded why we stay in the VTubing community. Not for the corporations, but for the connections we've built, the passion we share, and for the love for content creation, entertainment, and VTubing. In the face of adversity, this community doesn't just survive, it comes together stronger than ever. If you've enjoyed today's breakdown and want to support the channel, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss future uploads. And if you want exclusive videos, anime reactions, and unfiltered commentary I can't post here on YouTube, check out my Patreon linked in the description. Your support helps keep these deep dives going every single week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. On May 14, 2025, VShojo's chief marketing officer, known as... How the fuck do I pronounce his name? When he finally learned the full extent of the financial mismanagement... And in the wake of Ironmouse's video this year, And in the wake of Ironmouse's video this week... I meant this year. Rima, focus. Lock in. During their talks, Wheat urged Gunrun to solidify a proper 5-year plan to ensure VShojo's long-term sustainability. I've been speaking for so long, I can't even pronounce anymore. During their talks, Wheat urged Gunrun to solidify a proper 5-year plan to ensure VShojo's long-term During their talks, Wheat urged Gunrun to solidify a proper 5-year plan to ensure VShojo's long-term... Why can't long-term? Just say it, Rima. Fuck. Fans raised over 1 million... wait, how do I pronounce numbers? 1.355...